Hello and welcome to the show. We start this week's Canyon Rally with the Toyota off-road truck. This is essentially a Toyota Hilux. Now there are various different specs for this. I haven't quite gone for the full rock crawler. This is more of a general off-road vehicle. It is all-wheel drive, still does have relatively soft off-road suspension. I also happened to put a supercharger, only a stage 2 supercharger. But when I had an option to put a supercharger in the truck, it kind of had to be done, really, as I try to get the vehicle slowed down. Yeah, there's quite a lot of straight line speed in this. Now, the suspension is in some ways quite reminiscent of the Stadium Super Trucks, with the way that it'll lift the front wheel as you go around corners. Little bit too much speed from me would get myself into a lot of trouble as we go for a twist and a flip, and in fact many of flips and rolls down the side of the canyon, a big splat at the bottom, rather squishing the poor pickup truck. It turns out the Hilux in Beam can get wrecked quite heavily. The actual car does still work at this stage. It will still spin the wheels, but yeah, quite a lot of wheel axles were snapped in that particular tumble. Now, as I said, gave it a fair bit of power, which did mean a lot of speed down towards turn 2, and if you are too late on the brakes, yeah, you're going to end up in a rather nasty place. Turn 2 is a really tough one to get all of the vehicles slowed down for, and is unsurprising to get into trouble there. Likewise, the soft suspension on the landing of the bridge jump did cause some potential issues. I tried to get away with a lot of speed across there, although you'd often bounce and get into trouble. I almost managed to get it to a halt before we go tumbling again all the way down the cliff. Have another very, very flat-packed truck in all of that one. Yeah, one of the bigger problem areas, making sure to get everything slowed down for this second corner. Even when you did get it slowed down for the corner, you could still carry, or slow down before you get to the barrier, I should say, you can still carry a bit too much speed on the way in and end up having the front lift itself up off the ground, and then, well, it's quite a vicious flip on the way down, still twisting, not quite shedding body parts as we go, and eventually coming just about to a rest. I think the only thing snapped in that was or anything actual physically broken was the radiator. So yeah, the Hilux living up to, or Hilux-esque vehicle living up to its legendary status. As we head towards the faster corners, the off-road truck, funnily enough, not quite designed to carry 90-95 miles an hour through fast sweeping corners, and did get into a bit of trouble. Could have been a lot worse. I would like to point that out. Could have been a hell of a lot worse. Again, the truck's fine. It's going to drive away with no issue at all from that sort of a crash, but tumbling over was a real fear, clipping the rocks on the inside of the turn. A few vehicles have gone over in that manner, and not at all surprised to see this follow suit. Everything is all a little bit crossed up coming into the second corner, and while we kept it out of the Armco, it was still too much speed into the turn, and we would roll over, and this was quite a common theme with the truck. Amazingly, I managed to save it. The initial problem I saved, but in then trying to get going out of the hairpin, I got a little bit eager on the throttle, and then once again we're bouncing our way off the course. It is only the radiator that gets knackered in this tumble, and again, you know, the truck will still drive. Maybe a little bit of geometry problems with the front. It's not going to be going perfectly straight anymore. However, certainly quite manageable. As you would imagine, it is, yeah, an incredibly tough truck. It took a little bit of time to get the hang of. It was partly down to absolutely crazy levels of speed in a truck. It wasn't quite designed for absolutely crazy levels of speed. Yeah, the sort of normal spec for this wouldn't include the crazy supercharger. So as you could imagine, having a truck with this off-road orientated suspension, but able to do the kind of speeds that I was capable of getting it to with the supercharger, did mean you had to really tone it back and find at what points you could get away with carrying that corner speed. Equally, it wasn't the easiest thing to take flat out over the bridge jump. Now, some of the big sort of off-roading spec vehicles. The off-roading Vanster, for example, could be flat out across that jump, no problem. Even, you know, they're carrying 85 miles an hour, they'll hit the landing quite hard, but they'll be alright. This was a little too bouncy. It was a little too bouncy, and you were too likely to break stuff if you hit the landing very, very hard. So I had to opt for the little bit safer route, and yeah, when it's about 60, 64, 65 miles an hour, the landing was perfectly smooth, and you'll get more speed in a vehicle like this if you get a smooth landing and accelerate away, rather than land, clonk around, fight for control, and then go. So yeah, I had to be a little bit wary on that section. As I said, if anything, the suspension perhaps a tad too soft for this course as we now run up towards the fast-flowing section, almost 120 miles an hour in the pickup truck on our way into here. But you have really got to slow it down. You can see the front wanting to lift up through these corners as we begin the acceleration towards the line, and it's 102 miles an hour across that line. It's a very nasty clip of a rock after the finish that does absolutely nothing to the wheel. The tractor doesn't care that I've run across that rock at a really awkward angle. Normally that tears wheels off cars when you do that, even off-road vehicles, when you hit a rock at that sort of angle and the speed it was going. So, yeah, the fact that that all stayed together is pretty damn good going, almost managing to roll it over when going to park it up after the finish. But, yeah, it was an interesting experience trying to fight its way down the Canyon Rally course with a suspension setup such as that. And next car to go was the Mitsubishi EVO IX. This one in the hill climb spec. Plenty of power available in this. As you can see, we've also got a fair amount of aerodynamic parts to go with it, but it's not got the rally suspension as such. So it was whether the huge aero and the huge power would be enough to overcome the, well, caution that would be needed for places like turn 1 here, because we can't take that flat out. Equally, we can't get stuck on the outside grass and couldn't get the car pulled off it again, and that's where you will end up in a lot of bother. The sign claims yet another victim. It's claimed many a car. It is a very, very dangerous part of the track when you start running a little bit wide there. Just pulls the entire back of the car apart as we leave the bridge jump. It wasn't too bad on the landing. Could have been a lot worse for a car that is running relatively racy suspension. Either didn't get on the brakes soon enough for the next corner. It's again, perhaps one of the most common crashes on this entire Canyon Rally course, that one. Just not quite being able to get slowed down in a very, very bumpy braking zone. The engine was a little bit of a concern with the Evo. It was quite easy to brake it with a heavy clonk on the underside at the front. I ran a little bit wide out of a corner. Now, many a car has ended up in that dip and bounced across there with no problem, but you do it in the Evo and you catch it just a little bit wrong, and that will break the engine, and then you will have absolutely no drive. Also, the horrendous levels of power going on in this meant if you stepped on the throttle a little bit too quickly out of some of the slower corners, you get oversteer, and there are some places where you do not want to be getting oversteered just at the wrong moment, and that is one of them. That is indeed one of them. We've made quite an interesting hatchback Evo going on there. Now, as I said, there is plenty of downforce and plenty of speed in this car. I was pushing my luck on the way through the final corners there, seeing just how quick it could get away with it, and, well, it was a fraction too much speed and a little bit of oversteer combined, clipped the cliffside, and it's a big roll. That's an incredibly spectacular tumble from the Evo there. It was, yeah, proving to be not the easiest of cars, much like the other hill climb cars that have gone down here. You've got to try and manage the crazy speed, and it wasn't helped by the engine taking a battering at relative places. Unlike some of the other cars that have gone, like the Sunburst hill climb and so on, the aero bits, like the front splitter and so on, didn't tear themselves off as easily on this car. In fact, they were bloody strong on the EVO IX, which was nice, but the problem being, of course, that the engine did get knackered. Yeah, again, it took a little bit of time just to get used to the brutal speed and what you could and couldn't get away with in this really, really rather fast car. as mentioned, it's very, very helpful that the splitter doesn't disintegrate and go under the front wheels. That caused many a problem with other hill climb cars. Not so much the case with this one as we weave our way through these opening corners. It is perhaps a little bit more oversteery than some of the other hill climb cars. Did have to very much watch out for that one, and it's quite a lot of speed across the bridge jump as we take off the rally lights at the front. They're going to go scooting off down towards the bottom. In fact, bounced off the concrete barrier. They took quite a long way down the hill climb course, having come free of the Evo, but the splitter at the front and the diffuser at the rear had no problems with what was relatively heavy impacts on the ground. There is plenty of acceleration once you can get the traction up to 105 miles an hour before jumping on the brakes once more into the tunnel hairpin. A little bit of oversteer on the way out, but at no point did it feel like a particularly twitchy car. It wasn't going to be a twitch that was going to catch me out. It would just be pushing it a bit too hard with some slight oversteer. We do actually run out of gears as well at about 130 miles an hour down this back section. A little bit of wobbling going on. I didn't notice that from one of the rear wheels. Might have taken a knock somewhere. I'm not sure. That was a lot of flailing around. 123 miles an hour across the finish line for the Evo. Yeah, a tough car, this one. When we spin it around, you can see that apart from the rally lights going for a bit of an explore, for a car with much more race-orientated suspension, and for taking a relatively heavy knock on the bridge jump, as a lot of cars will at those sorts of speeds, it is, seriously tough vehicle. Barely any damage done to the front. I think the bonnet's slightly pinged up, but yeah, that's some serious toughness from the Evo, and there is more than enough power to go for a little bit of a celebratory donut. Yeah, quite a crazy vehicle, but also pretty damn well suited to going down the mountain. Then we get some proper celebratory donuts on the go. It's nice being able to have a car that is able to do that. Yeah, a lot of them not quite. Our final vehicle, it is a revisit for the FR16, as this car has had an update since I first ran it that has made it a little bit stronger and given it considerably more downforce. Now, this was an absolute beast through the corners, by far the fastest car through the turns. However, it lost out overall to the Capri because we had to crawl our way over the jumps because, well, it's a Formula car, let's face it. So I was curious to see how it might fare now with even more corner speed. You could really throw it through the turns, and it did take me a little while to get used to just how much speed could be taken in this car. So this opening run is kind of quite tame for the FR16. Now, I wasn't really sure what we could do across the jumps. Now, that was a 76 mile an hour takeoff, and the front wing did survive the landing of that. The rear wing, not so much, as you can see, doing its own thing at the back, and that is not good for downforce. As we go across the dirt section, in the end, we'd lose the front wing, and that gets kind of wedged under the wheels. The rear wing has completely collapsed, and as the aero bits come apart, and on this car, it's by far the most noticeable of any vehicle I'll have ever driven on Beam, mainly because everything's exaggerated because it's a Formula car. When you lose the wings and so on, you notice the massive lack of downforce, or the wonky downforce. Too much speed into turn 2 is going to get you whatever car you're driving. Again, the flappy rear wing, although it is the front wing coming off and ending up puncturing the rear tyre on its way through that does the car in. Sometimes the heavy impacts would slightly glitch out the car and it'd have to be forcibly reset because it does hit stuff incredibly quickly. When you've got the sort of speed that this thing is doing, yeah, when it hits something hard, there is a lot of force, and the game has a few issues with it. Clipping the Armco is never good in an open-wheeled car. That snapped off the front wheel and snapped off the front wing. It's 172 miles, and I think it's 174 at one point into this section. There's just so much speed that I'm not used to taking into these corners. I managed to lose control as we come towards the finish line, and I love like that crash. I love watching the way it reacts through the air as the rear wing starts starts flapping around, the way that the car changes direction as the aero is frantically trying to do something, but it's not doing what it's supposed to because it's slightly broken. Really, really interesting. Now, you could get away with speed across the bridge jump. However, most of the time things would go wrong, and the aero has all sorts of issues, ending up boomeranging the car as bits have fallen off and it twists around. It's yeah, an interesting demonstration of stuff going on with this car, and you have to be really careful across these bigger jumps, because once you snapped off aero bits, the stability would go completely, as it shows here with the rear wing ending up tearing itself off just at the critical moment as I go to turn, and that sudden loss of downforce would see me lose the vehicle and hit a rock at God knows how many miles an hour. It is a lot of speed. That's a hell of a crash for the Formula car. The aero was massively significant in this one, and I like the challenge. I like the challenge of having to deal with that. 90 miles an hour across the bridge jump is a little bit too much, as we lose both the front and rear wings and manage to break all of the suspension. While you could get away with about 60 miles an hour across the jump, it was a little bit erratic. Unless you got it absolutely 100% spot on, you could end up snapping either the rear wing or the front wing, and it was one of those that the risk just wasn't quite worth it in the end. But you didn't have to crawl over it at about 10 miles an hour like you did previous. Now, the front wing would shed its end plates quite regularly around here, and that was just something that you would kind of have to deal with. There wasn't a huge amount that I could do, and it didn't affect the handling too much. In this actual completed run, you will see me, I am quite slow across the bridge jump, and we do have a little bit of issues going on with the rear wing. Now, I was quite concerned about this, but it is only one end plate that's flapping. The main part of it doesn't become loose, which is perhaps the most critical part. We can get away with one end plate flapping as long as the main section is okay, and we do carry some decent speed across the dirt section and don't lose any more of the front wing. It's 125 miles an hour before we head through the tunnel hairpin, fighting the car ever so slightly on the exit, but once we're out of that corner we could accelerate away. We do lose a large chunk of the front wing on the run into these fast corners, but it's relatively okay. It's still relatively stable at 120, accelerating up to 150 miles an hour. We're across the dirt, and we do lose the rest of the front wing. That all becomes free just before we cross the finish line, but it's not really needed once we've aimed the car at the finish. So it makes it, and we were able to take more speed. Admittedly, yeah, there was a fair bit of damage done to the front of the car towards the latter stages of the run, and the rear wing was loose, but thankfully the right-hand side stayed connected, so it kept the main part of it in place, and we didn't lose too much grip from all of that, kept the car drivable, basically, for the rest of the way down the course. It is, I mean, the EVO was a very, very crazy quick car down here, but this will completely and utterly ruin your sense of speed with anything else, because it's an open-wheeled Formula car. You can imagine the sort of grip this can get, the speed it can get through corners is absolutely absurd. And it does celebratory donuts as well, which is always a good thing. So it is on to the times, and the Ford Capri has been beaten. The FR16 goes to the top of the table with a 1:14.9. That is a massively fast time down this course, with more strength slightly across the jumps. Means I don't have to crawl as slowly over those sections, and even more grip through the corners. I think even more acceleration as well. That is an incredible time. I mean, not taking away from what the Capri managed to do. However, yeah, the FR16 will blitz the table. It's also a very quick time from the EVO IX. A 1:30.3 is about a second down on the Sunburst hill climb. It beats the V12K series, beats the SBR4 hill climb. That is a very good time from the EVO IX as well. Two incredibly quick cars in this episode. The Toyota Off-Roader is into 45th place, a 1:42.2. The quite soft suspension making it an interesting drive down the course. Still not a bad time. Mind, it beats the Celica GT4, the Dodge Daytona, the RG Sandstorm. Loses out to the Jupiter Gravity Caravan, mind, although that's a little bit messing around with interesting settings. You know, it's not that far off the Baja Vanster, so That's, yeah, another decent showing, and probably one of the most capable off-road vehicles to have gone down here. Definitely the suspension setup not suited to this kind of high-speed tarmac course, so it did pretty well in that regard. However, that is going to be it for this episode, and it is going to be the last Canyon Rally, certainly for a little while. We are going to be continuing the Driven Till Destruction series from now on in this Saturday morning slot. We may come back to the Canyon Rally at some point. I may later on go to a different rally stage, find a different sort of rally stage to be time trialing vehicles down on Beam. But yeah, people seem to really like the Driven to Destruction thing. I really like that as a series. I'm curious to see how various cars are going to survive. I think that series might end up having 2 episodes a week, and when I've got through all of the cars that I want to do on that, yeah, we may come back to the Canyon, or we may go to a different rally stage. So we are going to crown the FR16 as the fastest car of the Canyon. However, that's going to be it from me. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.